Hi, my name is Todd Gross. You probably are aware that press releases are one of the quickest ways to indirectly get your website boosted to the top of the search engine rankings like that, sometimes in well under an hour. In other words, if you have your product or your website listed in a press release, as the press release goes up to the top, so does your site, at least in terms of being embedded in the press release itself. But if there's one thing that we've learned, it's that it doesn't usually stick for many weeks in a row. And in fact, sometimes you can only go so far with this technique. Some of the hardest search terms are difficult to actually rank for. Well, there is a way around that, and that's right, the correct kind of press release. Not just one that your product or website is thrown into the press release for the sake of SEO, but if you write it correctly for the excitement, for the drama, for the attention, and for the rest of the world to really want to read your press release in the first place. And there's one man who has taken this to a science. He's an expert at it. He's been doing it for years. He's been doing it for some of the biggest companies and biggest names in the world. And his name is Dan Page. Now, Dan has re-released his search engine Caffeine product. It tells you exactly where and how to release your press releases, how to write them, and also, of course, exactly the sites that he uses to be so successful. I had a chance to sit down with Dan and actually do an interview. You're going to hear that interview right now. Let's go to my interview with Dan Page about his new search engine Caffeine and how you can write the better press release. Okay, I'm here with Dan Page, who is a very successful internet marketer, but it goes way beyond that. He goes way back, and press releases come second nature to him, which is, of course, something that we've been focused on as a team, as a group, for quite some time now, for 2 months or so. And it all started, interestingly enough, with Search Engine Caffeine, which was a product he put out very late June, early July, in that time period, 2012. So Dan, what I first want to ask you is basically your experience with press releases in general and how that has kind of come on into the online world.
Certainly. I've been doing press releases for, oh gosh, I can't even think how many years now, probably at least 7, 8 years. And that really was an outgrowth of needing to promote my business and promote my clients and be able to find not only consumers out there, but reporters, bloggers, writers, other website owners that might be interested in what I was trying to promote, whether it be my own product to others. And I was convinced there were so many people out there that would love to hear about what we were doing. And I was at the time just searching for tools to be able to reach them.
When you did this, was it strictly online, or was this a hybrid from experience from the offline world? In other words, the media world? I know when television stations have worked at, press releases came second nature.
Absolutely. And I actually did start offline, and I'd still do offline press releases and just using a good old-fashioned fax machine. And that was very, very successful. At the same time, though, by doing offline only, I wasn't getting any online exposure, very little online exposure. So I wanted to be able to leverage that offline with the online exposure. And probably one of the very first successes I had with that was with my then 10-year-old son, who was had this very unique program he was doing with Cub Scouts to help feed hungry kids. And so I sent an online press release out there about what he was doing. And we ended up with television interviews nationwide, radio interviews, newspaper stories, and everything from that one simple press release.
Where did that go? I mean, the press release, where did it land?
Well, I put it out using the exact same process that I described in Search Engine Caffeine, but I guess if we say it landed, I had television stations across the country who responded to that.
I think I heard you've made millions of dollars with press releases since then, or including that, or before then. I mean, what's the story there?
Well, my expertise is really as a corporate business development specialist. So I've been hired for over 30 years now by very large companies, ranging from Citibank to the Rolling Stones and Visa and Coors and all sorts of very large companies, in addition to scores of smaller, very successful companies, to drive new revenue. And a lot of that means driving new sales, getting attention for what it is they were doing, understanding their customers, and being able to create new streams of opportunities coming toward them And so the revenue that I've generated has been all part of that process, and press releases and getting that message out there is a part of as one of the quivers that the arrows I have in my quiver.
Okay, and is that the kind of thing? I mean, we're going to be talking about search engine caffeine in more detail in a moment, but is that the same exact method, or is there something different that you did with them, the larger companies, than someone would do on a smaller scale?
What I was doing with the larger companies was it was not just search engine caffeine. That is just a marketing tool that I use and use very, very successfully. But when appropriate and we really wanted to go out and generate activity and buzz, then by all means I would utilize the underpinning of what search engine caffeine represents.
Okay, so let's go over then the original product that you put out, which some of my subscribers did latch on to. And they also then, purchased press release traffic code 2 from me, which had a certain focus. Let's go over your original product, and then let's talk about some of the differences between the original and what we've got now. So just assume that they haven't gotten anything to do with press releases whatsoever. What will they get specifically in this product this time?
Well, what you're going to get this time, the core product is still the same because it'd be silly, but I can't improve upon perfection. This is a process that I use, and I'll back up a little bit. What I did is I'm a business development geek, so my entire expertise is in driving massive attention and massive sales. What search engine caffeine is just a process that I use on a regular basis when I want to be able to get my story, my online business, my offline business, when I want to get it in front of two audiences. One audience is those consumers who might be plugging in a specific set of keywords, looking for something that I provide, because I'm absolutely convinced that they are out there. If I'm trying to reach consumers, I do go ahead and do the research on the keywords that I believe they're going to be searching for, what I really want to be able to get in front of them for. But a lot of times people make the mistake of only doing that and only thinking of that. They're looking at a press release as an SEO backlink tool. And from my perspective, that is woefully underserved from what a press release really represents, because one of those audiences is consumers, but the other audience, and ultimately the much larger opportunity, is getting your story and first coming up with that great story, but getting your story in front of the reporters, the bloggers, the website owners who are just looking for meat, looking for juice that they can put in front of their audience. And if you give them something, you do them a huge favor. If you give them a great story that they can really put in front of their audience, and that's where I've had some of my greatest successes with the process that I described in search engine caffeine. So that same product exists as it did when we rolled it out back in June. But I've added to that a lot. A couple of things. I did a 2.5-hour marathon webinar answering any questions that anybody might have about press releases, about search engine caffeine, about keywords, and I include that now with the product. I'm also going to do another marathon webinar answering anybody else's questions they may have. And I really want to focus a lot with people on how to create that great story, because now that I have a coaching program, and people have signed up for my coaching program, and I've really learned where they're struggling, because anyone with average intelligence can take the system that I've described and learn it. But if you're just putting out a boring press release that doesn't pass the who cares rule, then it's not going to do you any good. So I'm going to put a lot of attention on that going forward. And toward that end, I've gone out and I've done a couple of interviews. I've interviewed a top copywriter named Brian McLeod, and just grilled him on copywriting techniques as they apply to press releases, because I see a lot of people are really woefully unprepared and don't really understand how a good copywriting mindset can help you to generate fantastic press releases. So I have that entire interview as part of the new product. And the other side is a lot of people are just doing press releases in this vacuum and don't understand or not really thinking about what the person on the other end of that release, the reporter, the website owner, is looking for. And because I think the biggest mistake that I see in press releases is people treat it like a sales letter. And they go out and they talk about me, what's important to me. And quite frankly, the people on the other side of your press release don't care about you. They care about themselves and what it is they're interested in. So I interviewed one of the top reporters nationwide, and she spent over a decade sitting on the other side of that desk, looking at press releases every day, hundreds and hundreds of press releases every day, and I grilled her on what she looked for and grilled her about the press releases that she grabs and creates and puts out there in the media versus the vast majority that she throws away. So I'm rolling all that into the product as well.
Okay, so you're bringing up a really good point, and I think that we need to make the distinction between press releases in this sort of traditional sense, getting your story out there in an interesting way so that it's covered so that you're going to have some success with it, versus the SEO method, which was our focus in Press Release Traffic Code 2, which wasn't as elegant. There, what we were saying was you can put your website within a press release, get the press release ranked quickly, and therefore your website will be carried along with it. But we didn't stress anything about having, good writing, or, all we were doing was saying to get ranked high, you have to put a certain number of keywords into your press release a certain number of times. Don't overdo it, don't underdo it, and we gave some instruction in that regards. But we weren't talking about the kind of quality press releases that you are. But most of the people that I deal with on a daily basis don't really have that story in them right off the bat. So what they have instead is a product, an affiliate link, a website, or something that they're trying to get noticed, and they're trying to get that ranked high in the search engines. If that is their focus, what is your suggestion about spicing things up, since that isn't something they would have thought of in the first place? How would you suggest that they turn around and spice up their website or spice up their affiliate promotion of a product to make this into an interesting story? Because that sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is, but ultimately, Todd, it's the fun part and it's the interesting part, because in Search Engine Caffeine, I go into a lot of the specifics of exactly which keywords to look for and how to be able to research your keywords and all that kind of stuff, so you can get your release out there and get it ranked. But the challenge is, as we were just talking about, and passing that who cares test, and I'll say that part nicely, is like who cares about what you're trying to promote. So the process that I go through is, the first thing I do is I look at my ultimate audience. So if I'm trying to sell a product or a webinar or a service, whatever I'm trying to sell, what I try not to do, and I encourage people and try to teach them not to do, is don't just treat it as a sales letter and look what you're trying to promote, because your conversion from the click on your press release to your ultimate sale is going to be far lower than it would be if you take a different approach. So what I do is I look at my audience, and first you have to start with some assumptions, but I look at my audience and try to think about, first off, what it is relative to my product. What about my product is interesting? What's weird? What's funny? What's tragic? What's very timely? Maybe plugs into a current event, or what's shocking? What's ironic? What's juxtaposed? Sometimes you can create a juxtaposition between what you're providing and what the person is looking for. And I really look at the product and try to come up with something that really grabs you by the throat. And rather than just saying, buy my product, here it is, features and benefits, like everybody else does. And then secondly, I look at my audience and try to make some assumptions. Who are they? What do they look like? What are their demographics and psychographics? What do they look like per se? What are the things they like to do? What are their interests? Where do they hang out? What are they secretly longing for? And try to do the best I can to understand what my audience, making some assumptions, might really be looking for. And there's some tools you can use to learn about that. But with my audience, I'm looking at, what are their hopes? What are their longings, their fears, their anxieties, their dreams, their aspirations, their frustrations? What pisses them off? What would they really be ecstatic about if I had the power to give it to them? And then I look at that, and those at the intersection of the funny or weird things I might be able to find with my product, and that list I just quickly went down there, and thinking about my audience, and from there I look to try to create a story. Try to create a story where I can intersect the two of those. And once you do this 2, 3, 4, 10 times, it starts to become a learned lesson. It's not something that you're either born with or you're not. It's something that's a process that you can learn. And quite often, I'll just start that off with a headline. because a lot of people look at the press release and what I'm trying to sell, but instead I just think of a really killer headline. If I saw this headline and had the types of interests that my audience might have, my God, I just have to read the story if I saw this headline.